Single dad faints from hunger at bus stop. The driver who helps him inherited Amazon stock worth billions, but what happens next will leave you speechless because she's about to change his life in a way no one could have predicted. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun cast long shadows across the bus stop as James Palmer swayed on his feet. His vision blurred, and the chattering crowd around him seemed to fade into a distant hum. His stomach cramped painfully. He couldn't remember the last proper meal he'd eaten. The world tilted sideways. James tried to steady himself against the bus stop pole, but his fingers slipped. The concrete rushed up to meet him as everything went black. "Sir, can you hear me?" A gentle voice cut through the darkness. James blinked, gradually becoming aware of concerned faces hovering above him. A woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair knelt beside him, her hand supporting his shoulder. "I'm fine," James mumbled, trying to push himself up. His cheeks burned with embarrassment as he realized he was sprawled on the sidewalk. "Just got a little dizzy." "You fainted," the woman said firmly. "When was the last time you ate?" James looked away, unable to meet her gaze. The truth was, he'd been skipping meals to make sure Lily had enough to eat. His daughter's needs always came first. "That's what I thought," the woman said, her voice softening. "I'm Megan Walker. Let me help you up, and we'll get some food in you." "Really, I can't," James protested, but his stomach betrayed him with a loud growl. "I insist," Megan said, helping him to his feet. She kept a steadying hand on his elbow as he swayed slightly. "There's a diner just around the corner. Please, let me do this." Something in her tone, genuine concern without pity, made James hesitate. His pride screamed at him to refuse, but exhaustion and hunger won out. He nodded slightly. The diner was warm and smelled of coffee and bacon. Megan guided James to a booth and ordered coffee for both of them. When the waitress came, she insisted he order a full breakfast. "I know how hard it is," Megan said as James took his first bite of scrambled eggs. "Being a single parent isn't easy." James paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "How did you—" "The way you mentioned your daughter when you were coming to," Megan explained. "Lily, right? The love in your voice when you said her name? I recognized it. My late husband had that same tone when he talked about our children." James took a sip of coffee, studying Megan more carefully. She was well dressed but not flashy, with an air of quiet confidence. "I'm sorry about your husband." "Thank you," Megan said softly. "It's been 5 years now. He built the bus company from nothing, you know. When he passed, I inherited everything, including quite a substantial amount of Amazon stock he'd invested in early on." James nearly choked on his coffee. "The bus company? You own the very bus you were waiting for," Megan smiled. "Life has a funny way of working out sometimes. Here, let me give you a ride home. It's the least I can do." Outside, a sleek black car waited at the curb. James hesitated again, but Megan was already opening the door. "Please," she said. "You shouldn't be on your feet just yet." The leather seats were softer than anything James had felt in years. He gave his address quietly to the driver, feeling increasingly out of place in his worn work clothes. "James," Megan said as they drove, "I know we've just met, but I want you to have this." She pulled a business card from her purse. "My personal number is on the back. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, please call." "Mrs. Walker, Megan, please," she corrected gently. "And before you refuse, remember that sometimes accepting help isn't weakness, it's strength. Take it, rest today, and think about it." The car pulled up to James's apartment building, a stark contrast to the luxury vehicle they sat in. James held the business card carefully, as if it might disappear. "Thank you," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. "For everything." "Get some rest, James," Megan said warmly. "And remember what I said." James walked slowly up to his apartment, his mind spinning. The morning felt surreal, like something from a dream. He looked down at the business card in his hand, still trying to process everything that had happened. The elegant cardstock felt out of place in his calloused fingers, just as he had felt out of place in Megan's world. But there was something about her, a genuine warmth that had cut through his usual defenses. Inside his small apartment, he placed the card carefully on his kitchen counter. The breakfast Megan had bought him had filled his stomach, but his mind was full of questions. Why would someone like her, wealthy, successful, take an interest in helping someone like him? He wasn't used to kindness without strings attached, and part of him waited for the other shoe to drop. But as he sank into his worn couch, exhaustion finally catching up with him, he couldn't deny the small spark of hope that had ignited in his chest. Maybe, Just maybe, this strange morning would turn out to be more than just a bizarre encounter. Maybe it could be the beginning of something different. For now, though, he needed to rest. Lily would be home from school in a few hours, and he wanted to be alert for her. As his eyes drifted closed, the business card sat on the counter, a tangible reminder that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. James stared at the business card in his hands, turning it over and over as morning light filtered through the threadbare curtains of his small apartment. The elegant cream-colored card with its raised lettering felt out of place in his calloused fingers. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying yesterday's embarrassing incident at the bus stop. Lily's voice broke through his thoughts. "Dad, we're out of cereal again." His heart sank. The kitchen cabinets were nearly empty, and his next paycheck wasn't due for days. Looking at his daughter's hopeful face, James made a decision. With trembling fingers, he dialed the number on Megan's card. She answered on the second ring. "James, I'm so glad you called. He cleared his throat. "I hate to ask, but need a ride to the store?" Megan's voice was warm, without a trace of judgment. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to her word, exactly 20 minutes later, a sleek silver car pulled up outside their apartment building. James had never seen anything so expensive parked in his neighborhood before. He led Lily down the crumbling concrete steps, feeling self-conscious about the peeling paint and overgrown shrubs around the entrance. Megan stepped out, wearing casual clothes that probably cost more than his monthly rent, but her smile was genuine as she greeted them. "You must be Lily. Your dad told me about you yesterday." Lily smiled shyly, clutching James's hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Walker. Please, call me Megan." She opened the car door for them. The leather seats were soft and cool, and the air conditioning was a welcome relief from the morning heat. As they drove, James found himself opening up, surprised by how easy it was to talk to Megan. "After Sarah, my wife, passed away, everything changed. I've been working 2 jobs, sometimes 3, but it never seems to be enough." Megan nodded, her eyes fixed on the road. "I understand more than you might think. Money, it doesn't fix everything." Her voice grew quiet. "When Tom died, I inherited all this wealth, but I'd trade every penny to have one more day with him." The car fell silent for a moment, the hum of the engine, the only sound. Lily gazed out the window, her reflection thoughtful in the tinted glass. "How long has it been?" James asked softly. 2 years next month." Megan's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "The house feels so empty now. Sometimes I walk through rooms we used to share, and it's like living with ghosts." James understood that feeling all too well. "Sarah loved to sing while she cooked," he shared. "Sometimes I catch myself listening for her voice in the kitchen." They pulled into the grocery store parking lot, and James felt his pride wrestle with his need. But before he could say anything, Megan spoke up. "Please, let me do this. Not because I pity you, but because I know what it's like to face struggles alone." Inside the store, James tried to stick to the basics, but Megan kept adding items to their cart. Fresh fruits, vegetables, meat, and snacks for Lily's school lunches. When he started to protest, she shook her head. Think of it as one parent helping another. At the checkout, James couldn't help wincing at the total, but Megan handed over her credit card without hesitation, chatting with Lily about her favorite foods as if spending hundreds of dollars on groceries for strangers was perfectly normal. Loading the bags into the car, James felt a mix of emotions he couldn't quite sort out. Gratitude warred with embarrassment, relief with discomfort. The drive back was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. As they pulled up to his apartment building, Megan turned to face him. "James, I mean it. Call anytime you need anything. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is accept help when it's offered." James nodded, unable to find the right words to express his thanks. He and Lily gathered the grocery bags, and he watched as Megan's car disappeared around the corner, its engine purring softly into the distance. Standing in front of his building, bags of groceries at his feet, James felt the weight of his pride pressing down on him. The sound of Megan's car faded away, leaving him with questions he couldn't answer. Why would someone like her, with all her wealth and status, take such an interest in helping him? The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk as he picked up the bags and headed inside to his modest apartment, his mind still trying to make sense of this unexpected turn of events. Lily tugged at his sleeve as they climbed the stairs. "I like her, Dad. She's nice." James looked down at his daughter's earnest face and managed a small smile. "Yeah, kiddo, she is." James stared at his phone, Megan's voicemail playing for the 3rd time. Her warm voice filled his small kitchen as he prepared a simple breakfast of toast and eggs for Lily. "Hi, James. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call." "I meant what I said about helping." He set down the spatula and rubbed his tired eyes. The past few days had been a blur of work and worry, with Megan's kindness lingering in his thoughts. His pride told him to delete the message and move on, but something else, maybe desperation, maybe hope, made him pick up the phone. His fingers trembled slightly as he dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "James, I'm so glad you called." Megan's voice was genuine and welcoming. "Hi, Megan. I got your message," he said, shifting uncomfortably, even though she couldn't see him. "Would you like to come over for coffee this morning? We could talk more comfortably here." James glanced at the clock. It was his day off, and Lily was at school. Sure, okay." After getting her address, James found himself driving through a neighborhood that made him feel increasingly out of place. His old pickup truck looked like a rust bucket compared to the gleaming luxury cars parked in circular driveways. Megan's house, no, mansion, sat at the end of a tree-lined street. The building was impressive, but not flashy, with well-maintained gardens and a fountain bubbling peacefully in the front yard. James parked his truck, feeling self-conscious about the oil stain it might leave on the pristine concrete. Before he could reach the door, Megan opened it with a warm smile. She wore casual clothes, jeans, and a simple blouse, but they probably cost more than his entire wardrobe. "Welcome, please come in," she gestured inside. The interior was exactly what James had expected and feared. Elegant furnishings, artwork on the walls, and spotless hardwood floors that made him conscious of his worn work boots. Everything screamed wealth, but somehow it still felt like a home rather than a museum. "The kitchen's this way." Megan led him through the house. "I just made a fresh pot of coffee." The kitchen was huge, with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances that gleamed in the morning light. A coffee maker that looked more complicated than his car sat on the counter, producing what smelled like heaven. "Cream or sugar?" Megan asked, pulling 2 mugs from a cabinet. "Black is fine, thanks." James accepted the steaming cup, wrapping his calloused hands around its warmth. They sat at a breakfast nook overlooking the backyard. A pool sparkled in the morning sun, surrounded by more perfectly maintained gardens. "So," Megan began, "how have you been?" James stared into his coffee. "Fine, working, the usual." "James," her voice was gentle but firm, "you don't have to pretend with me. I know things aren't easy." He looked up, meeting her kind eyes. Something in her expression made the walls he'd built start to crack. "It's hard," he admitted. "Every month is a struggle. I'm working 3 jobs. But it never seems to be enough." Megan nodded, listening intently as he continued. "After Sarah, my wife, passed, I thought I could handle everything. But between the medical bills, rent, and trying to give Lily a decent life, he trailed off, embarrassed by the emotion in his voice. "I understand more than you might think," Megan said softly. She stood up and walked to a photo on the wall, a smiling man with kind eyes. "Tom, my husband, built his fortune from nothing. We were happy. But then cancer took him 2 years ago. Now I have all this." She gestured around her. "But some days it feels meaningless." James watched as she sat back down, noting the sadness in her eyes. "The money, the house, the company, it's all just stuff. What I miss is purpose. Tom and I always talked about using our wealth to make a difference, but we never got the chance." She smiled sadly. "Now I'm trying to figure out how to honor that dream alone." James felt his defenses lowering. Despite their different circumstances, he recognized the loneliness in her voice. "I want to help you, James," Megan continued. "Not out of pity, but because I see something in you. Determination, integrity. You're doing everything you can for your daughter, just like I'm trying to find meaning in what Tom left me." "I appreciate that, Megan, I really do," James said, his voice tight. "But I can't accept charity. I need to handle this myself." "It wouldn't be charity," she countered. "I could help you find better work, or maybe invest in your future. You mentioned you're good with your hands. Have you ever thought about starting your own business?" James's heart clenched. Of course, he had dreamed of running his own handyman service for years, but dreams were luxuries he couldn't afford. "I can't," he said firmly, standing up. "Thank you for the coffee and for listening, but I should go." Megan didn't try to stop him as he headed for the door, but her words followed him. "The offer stands, James. Sometimes accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom." The drive home felt longer than before. James's mind was a mess of conflicting emotions: gratitude for Megan's kindness, shame at his situation, and a stubborn pride that wouldn't let him accept help. Yet underneath it all was a nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, he'd found someone who truly understood his struggles, even if their lives couldn't be more different. His old truck rumbled into the apartment complex's parking lot. The contrast between Megan's world and his own stark and unmistakable. But for the first time in years, he felt something besides resignation, a connection, however unlikely, with someone who saw him as more than just another struggling single father. James stared at his phone, his thumb hovering over Megan's number. The screen's glow illuminated his tired face in the dimly lit break room of his workplace. His shoulders ached from hours of moving boxes, and his stomach churned with hunger. The manager had just told him they were cutting back on hours. Again. "Hey," a coworker called out. "Break's over." James nodded, pocketing his phone without making the call. Pride was a heavy weight, but it was familiar. He'd carried it for so long, he wasn't sure how to put it down. By the end of his shift, exhaustion had settled deep in his bones. The fluorescent lights in the parking lot buzzed overhead. As he checked his phone again, there was a new message from Megan. "I made too much pot roast. Would love some company if you're free." His finger trembled as he typed back, "Just finished work. Too tired." Her response came quickly. "I can pick you up. You need to eat, James." This time, he didn't refuse. 20 minutes later, Megan's car pulled up. She took one look at his pale face and clucked her tongue. "You look terrible," she said, but her voice was gentle. "Thanks." James managed a weak smile. "You really know how to make a guy feel special." The drive to her house was quiet. James leaned his head against the cool window, watching the streetlights blur past. His thoughts drifted to Lily, safe at home with the neighbor watching her, another favor he'd have to repay somehow. Megan's kitchen was warm and bright, nothing like the stark corporate break room he'd left behind. The smell of pot roast and fresh bread made his stomach growl audibly. "Sit," she insisted, pulling out a chair at the kitchen island. "Before you fall over." James sank into the seat, too tired to argue. Megan placed a plate in front of him, loaded with tender meat, roasted vegetables, and a thick slice of bread. The food was simple but perfectly cooked, and after the first bite, James couldn't stop eating. "Slow down," Megan cautioned, sitting across from him with her own plate. "It's not going anywhere." James forced himself to take smaller bites. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Haven't eaten much today. Or yesterday, I'm guessing." Megan's eyes were knowing. "Want to talk about it?" James set down his fork, studying the grain of the wooden countertop. "They cut my hours again," he admitted. "I'm barely making enough for rent as it is." "James." Megan's voice was soft. "I know what you're going to say," he interrupted. "That you can help. That I should let you help. But," his voice cracked, "I'm supposed to be able to do this. I'm supposed to take care of my daughter. Who told you you had to do it alone?" The question hung in the air between them. James pushed a carrot around his plate. "Nobody had to tell me. I'm her father. After Sarah died." He swallowed hard. "Lily deserves better than this, than a father who can barely keep food on the table." "What Lily deserves is a father who's healthy and present," Megan said firmly, "not one who's working himself into an early grave." James looked up, meeting her eyes. "You don't understand, don't I?" Megan's face softened. "You think because Thomas left me wealthy, we didn't have our struggles? Money doesn't solve everything, James. My husband worked 80-hour weeks building his company. We barely saw each other. When he got sick." She paused, collecting herself. All that success, all that money, it didn't make him happy. In the end, he regretted not spending more time with me, with our family. James watched as she stood up, walking to the window. The kitchen lights reflected in the glass, making it impossible to see outside. "Success isn't about doing everything yourself," she continued. "It's about knowing when to ask for help. That's something Thomas never learned, and I had to figure out the hard way after he was gone." James felt something crack inside his chest. His voice was barely a whisper. "I feel like such a failure. Every time I look at Lily, I see how much she's missing out on, how much I can't give her." "Oh, James." Megan returned to the counter, reaching across to squeeze his hand. "You're giving her everything that matters. Love, stability, a father who would do anything for her. But you can't pour from an empty cup." Tears pricked at James's eyes. He blinked them back, but one escaped, rolling down his cheek. "I'm so tired," he admitted. "Sometimes I don't know how I'm going to make it through another day." Then let someone help you carry the load, Megan said softly. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, finishing their meal. James felt the rigid walls he'd built around himself beginning to crumble. It was terrifying, but there was also a strange relief in it. As the evening drew to a close, Megan packed up some leftovers for him to take home. For Lily too, she insisted. And James, think about what I said. Asking for help isn't failing. It's being strong enough to admit you don't have to do it all alone. The drive home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. James clutched the container of food in his lap, feeling its warmth through the plastic. His chest still felt heavy with worry and fear, but something else had taken root alongside it. A tiny spark of hope, or maybe just the realization that he didn't have to carry his burdens in solitude. When Megan dropped him off, he stood on the sidewalk watching her car disappear around the corner. The weight of his fears was still there, pressing down on his shoulders, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel quite so alone beneath it. James stared at his phone as it buzzed on the kitchen counter. Megan's name flashed across the screen for the third time that week. He turned away, focusing instead on the stack of bills piling up near the sink. The morning sun filtered through the dusty kitchen window, highlighting the worn edges of unpaid notices. Not today, he muttered, shoving the phone deeper into his pocket. His hands were still rough from yesterday's painting job, specks of white clinging stubbornly to his knuckles, despite his best efforts to scrub them clean. The past few days had been a blur of activity. He'd picked up whatever work he could find, repairing Mrs. Henderson's rickety porch steps, touching up the Millers' living room walls, and fixing that squeaky door at the local diner. The jobs weren't much, but they were honest work. His muscles ached from the long hours, but at least he was doing it on his own terms. His phone vibrated again. This time, it was a text from Megan. "James, please call me when you can. I'd like to help." He deleted the message without responding. The memory of their last conversation at her mansion still made him uncomfortable. The way she looked at him with such concern, offering to invest in his future. The weight of her kindness felt like chains around his neck. In his small kitchen, James pulled out the check from his latest job, $200 for a full day's work painting the Miller's house. It wasn't bad money, but when he looked at the calendar on the wall, his stomach tightened. Rent was due in a week, and this wouldn't be enough. Not even close. The phone buzzed again. "Megan, just leave me alone," he whispered, hitting the decline button. He couldn't bear the thought of accepting her charity, of becoming another project for a wealthy woman with too much time and money on her hands. What would that teach Lily about working hard and standing on your own 2 feet? Speaking of work, he needed to get ready for his next job. Mr. Peterson needed help moving some furniture, and James couldn't afford to be late. He grabbed his tool belt and headed for the door, trying to ignore the growing pile of bills on the counter. The afternoon dragged on as James helped Mr. Peterson rearrange his basement. The old man chatted away about his grandchildren while James lifted heavy boxes and shifted dusty furniture. His back screamed in protest, but he pushed through the pain. Every dollar counted. When he finally made it home that evening, his clothes were covered in dust and his muscles were screaming. The smell of microwave macaroni and cheese, their third time this week, filled the small apartment. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. James sat at their small kitchen table, watching as Lily carefully divided the macaroni into 2 bowls. She'd gotten good at making simple meals when he worked late. Sometimes it made his heart ache, knowing she had to grow up so fast. His phone buzzed again. Another missed call from Megan. He turned the phone face down on the table, but not before Lily noticed. "That's the lady who helped you at the bus stop, isn't it?" she asked, sliding his bowl across the table. "Why don't you answer?" James stirred his macaroni absently. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Is it because she's rich?" Lily's question was direct, innocent in the way only a child's could be. "Tommy at school says rich people always want something in return." James set down his fork, surprised by his daughter's perception. "It's not that simple, Lily. I need to handle things on my own." "But why?" She took a bite of her dinner, watching him with those knowing eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. "You always tell me it's okay to ask for help when I need it." The words hit him like a physical blow. He pushed his bowl away, suddenly not very hungry. The weight of everything, the bills, the endless work, the constant worry, pressed down on his shoulders. "Dad?" Lily's voice was soft, concerned. "Why are you so upset?" James forced a smile, trying to hide the storm of emotions churning inside him. "I'm not upset, sweetie. Just tired from work." He picked up his fork again, making himself take a bite even though the food tasted like cardboard in his mouth. But Lily wasn't fooled. She watched him with those wise eyes, somehow seeing right through his brave face. The same eyes that had watched him try to hold everything together since her mother died. The same eyes that still held so much trust in him, even when he felt like he was failing her. James swallowed hard, the macaroni sticking in his throat. His pride had always been his shield, his way of proving to the world, and to himself, that he could handle anything life threw at him. But sitting there, under his daughter's concerned gaze, he wondered if that shield was becoming more of a burden than a protection. The phone lay silent now, face down on the table. But James could still feel its presence, like a weight pressing against his consciousness. Each ignored call from Megan felt like another brick in the wall he was building around himself. A wall that was supposed to keep out charity and pity, but was it also keeping out something else? Something that might actually help? He pushed these thoughts aside, focusing instead on finishing his dinner. But the questions lingered, mixing with the guilt and pride that had become his constant companions. Tomorrow would be another day of searching for work. Another day of trying to prove he could do it all on his own. Another day of ignoring the help that was being offered, simply because accepting it felt too much like failing. The macaroni and cheese grew cold in their bowls as father and daughter sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy in the air between them. James stared at the calendar on his kitchen wall, his heart sinking as he counted the days until Lily's birthday. Just 2 weeks away. The red circle he'd drawn around the date seemed to mock him. His fingers traced the worn edges of his empty wallet, knowing there wasn't enough money for even a modest gift. The apartment felt particularly small tonight. Toys were scattered across the floor, most of them hand-me-downs or garage sale finds from better times. Lily was in her room, humming softly as she did her homework. The sound made his chest ache. She never complained, never asked for expensive things like other kids her age did. "Dad?" Lily called from her room. "Can you help me with my math?" "Coming, sweetheart," he replied, quickly stuffing his wallet back into his pocket. He couldn't let her see his worry. As he settled onto Lily's bed, helping her work through multiplication tables, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Megan's name flashed on the screen. He'd been avoiding her calls for days, but something made him pause this time. Maybe it was the weight of Lily's upcoming birthday pressing down on him, or maybe he was just tired of carrying everything alone. "I should take this," he said to Lily, ruffling her hair. "Keep working on problem 6. I'll be right back." In the kitchen, James finally answered the phone. "Hello, James?" Megan's warm voice filled the line. "I was starting to worry. How are you doing?" He leaned against the counter, running a hand through his hair. "I'm managing." "That doesn't sound very convincing," she said gently. "What's really going on?" The concern in her voice broke something in him. "It's Lily's birthday soon," he admitted, "and I can't even afford to get her a proper gift. What kind of father can't give his daughter a birthday present?" "Oh, James," Megan's voice softened. "Being a good father isn't about how much you can spend on presents, but would you let me help? Maybe we could plan something special for her?" His pride reared up instantly. "Megan, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking," she interrupted. "I'm offering. There's a difference." James glanced toward Lily's room, where he could still hear her humming. "I don't know. What if we did something simple?" Megan suggested. "The community park has that lovely pavilion. We could have a small party there. Just cake, some decorations, maybe invite a few of her friends." The idea of Lily having a real birthday party made his throat tight. She hadn't had one since her mother died. That's very kind of you." "James," Megan said firmly, "you're not alone in this. It's okay to accept help sometimes. It doesn't make you any less of a father." He sank onto the couch, feeling the familiar battle between pride and practicality wage inside him. The image of Lily's face lighting up at a surprise party won out. "Okay," he said quietly, "but nothing extravagant." "Of course not," Megan agreed. "Just something special for a special girl." Over the next 2 weeks, Megan helped coordinate everything. She kept it simple as promised. Balloons, streamers, a homemade cake from the local bakery. James helped where he could, making decorations with supplies Megan brought over and addressing invitations to Lily's classmates. The day of the party arrived bright and clear. James watched from the park pavilion as Lily played tag with her friends, her laughter carrying across the grass. She wore the new dress Megan had insisted on getting her, claiming it was just a small birthday gift from an old friend. Megan appeared beside him, holding 2 paper cups of lemonade. "Here," she said, offering him one. "You look like you could use this." "Thank you," he said, and they both knew he meant for more than just the drink. I haven't seen her this happy in a long time. She's a wonderful girl, Megan said, watching Lily chase her friends around the playground. You've done an amazing job with her, James. He gripped the cup tighter, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. I don't know about that. I can barely keep a roof over her head. Look at her, Megan insisted. Really look. She's happy. She's kind. She's loved. That's what matters. Not the size of your apartment or the price of her clothes. James watched as Lily stopped running to help up a smaller child who had fallen. His daughter's gentle smile, so like her mother's, made his heart swell. Maybe Megan was right. Maybe being there, loving her, doing his best, maybe that counted for more than he'd thought. Megan touched his arm lightly. Accepting help doesn't make you weak, James. It makes you human. We all need support sometimes. He met her warm smile with one of his own, finally feeling something inside him start to soften. The wall of pride he'd built so carefully began to crack, letting in a glimmer of hope. As Lily's laughter echoed across the park again, James realized that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to not carry everything alone. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of James's apartment as he sat at his small kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee. The events of yesterday's birthday celebration played through his mind like a gentle melody. Lily's laughter echoed in his memories as she played with the other children at the park, her face lit up with pure joy. It was more than he could have given her on his own, and that thought both warmed and troubled his heart. He glanced at the few birthday photos he'd managed to take on his old phone. Lily's smile was radiant as she blew out the candles on the cake Megan had arranged. The party hadn't been extravagant, just a simple gathering with some treats, games, and a few of Lily's friends from school, but it had meant everything to his daughter. James ran his fingers through his hair, exhaling deeply. The weight of his pride felt heavier than ever. But something else was there too, a whisper of hope. Megan's kindness hadn't come with strings attached or judgment. She'd simply wanted to help, to bring happiness to a little girl's special day. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Megan. Lunch today? My treat. I'd love to discuss some ideas with you. James stared at the message for a long moment. His thumb hovered over the keyboard as his mind wrestled with the decision. Finally, he typed, "Okay. Thank you." They met at a small diner downtown, the kind of place where the coffee was always fresh and the booths were worn but comfortable. Megan was already there when he arrived, dressed simply in jeans and a casual blouse. She smiled warmly as he slid into the booth across from her. "I ordered you some coffee," she said, gesturing to the steaming cup in front of him. "I hope that's okay." "Thanks," James replied, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. "And thank you again for yesterday. Lily hasn't stopped talking about it." Megan's eyes crinkled with genuine pleasure. "It was my joy to help. You know, James, seeing her happiness yesterday made me realize something. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give others is the opportunity to help." James shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I'm not used to accepting help. It feels like you're failing." Megan finished gently. "But you're not. You're being smart and brave and putting your daughter's needs first." The waitress came by to take their orders, giving James a moment to collect his thoughts. When she left, Megan leaned forward slightly. "I've been watching you, James. The way you work, your attention to detail, how you treat people. You're skilled at what you do, all those repair jobs and handiwork. Have you ever thought about turning that into something more?" James's heart skipped a beat. "You mean starting my own business?" The dream he buried deep inside began to stir. "I've thought about it, but the startup costs, the risks. What if those weren't obstacles?" Megan pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. "I'd like to offer you a business loan, not charity, an investment, with reasonable terms and a solid plan for repayment." James's hands trembled slightly as he opened the folder. Inside were preliminary business plans, market research, and financial projections. "You've really thought this through." "I have," Megan nodded. "And I'm not just doing this for you. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about my wealth, about what really matters. Tom, my late husband, he always said money was just a tool. It's what you do with it that counts." Their food arrived, and they spent a few minutes in comfortable silence, eating and considering the weight of the conversation. James studied the documents between bites, his mind racing with possibilities. "I've decided to sell some of my Amazon stock," Megan continued. "Not all of it, but enough to make a real difference in causes I believe in. Supporting single parents, helping small businesses get started. These are things that can change lives." James looked up from the papers. Why me? Because you have integrity, skill, and determination. You just need a chance. She smiled. And because I believe in you. James felt something shift inside him, like a key turning in a long-rusted lock. I'd start small, he said slowly. Build up gradually. Make sure everything's stable before expanding. That's exactly the kind of thinking that tells me this is right, Megan responded. We can work out the details, set up proper contracts, make sure everything's professional and above board. As they finished their lunch, James felt lighter than he had in years. The future suddenly seemed less like a heavy weight and more like an open road. He carefully tucked the folder into his worn jacket. I'll review everything tonight, he said, standing up. Thank you, Megan, not just for this, but for showing me that accepting help doesn't mean giving up control of my life. That's exactly right, Megan replied, her eyes warm with understanding. Sometimes it just means having the courage to take the first step. As James walked out of the diner into the bright afternoon sun, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time possibility. The folder in his jacket felt like a key to a new chapter in his life, one where he could build something meaningful for himself and Lily. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was planning for a future he could shape with his own hands. James sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by papers, brochures, and business guides from the local library. The warm morning light filtered through the window, casting a gentle glow on his makeshift workspace. His coffee had gone cold, forgotten in the midst of his research. Dad, what does liability insurance mean? Lily peered over his shoulder, her small finger pointing at the text. James smiled, pulling her onto his lap. It's something that protects my business if anything goes wrong during a job, like if I accidentally break something while fixing it. Oh, Lily nodded seriously. That's smart. You should definitely get that. Her simple wisdom made him chuckle. James had spent the past week meeting with local business experts, and each conversation left him with more questions than answers. But somehow, his daughter's straightforward perspective helped clear his mind. The following morning, James met with Sarah Chen, a small business advisor at the local community center. Her office was modest but welcoming, with potted plants decorating the windowsill. Starting small is key, Sarah explained, adjusting her reading glasses as she reviewed his initial business plan. You already have the skills and experience. Now it's about building a client base and managing the business side of things. James nodded, taking careful notes. I've been doing odd jobs for years, but running my own business feels different. It is different, Sarah agreed. But you're not starting from scratch. Those satisfied customers from your previous work? They're potential clients now. Back home, James created a simple spreadsheet of all his tools and equipment. Some needed replacing, others just needed maintenance. The loan from Megan would help with that, though the thought still made him uncomfortable. Lily helped him organize his tools in the garage, turning it into a proper workspace. She insisted on labeling everything with bright sticky notes. This way you'll always know where things are, Dad, she explained, carefully writing hammers in her neat third-grade handwriting. What would I do without my little assistant? James ruffled her hair, earning a giggle. The first week of officially being in business was both exciting and terrifying. James printed simple business cards at the local copy shop. Nothing fancy, just his name, phone number, and Palmer's Handyman Services in clean black text. His first official job came from Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly neighbor who needed her kitchen sink fixed. James arrived precisely on time, his tools organized in his old pickup truck. The sink's been leaking for weeks, Mrs. Rodriguez explained, wringing her hands. I hope you can fix it. James worked methodically, explaining each step to Mrs. Rodriguez as he went. When he finished, the sink worked perfectly, and his first official invoice was paid with a warm smile and a promise to recommend him to friends. More jobs followed. A broken fence at the Thompsons' house, a stuck garage door at the Clarks. Each job, no matter how small, James approached with professionalism and care. He kept detailed records of expenses and income, just as Sarah had taught him. Lily became his unofficial secretary, helping him organize his schedule on their kitchen calendar. She used different colored markers for different types of jobs. Blue for plumbing, green for carpentry, red for urgent repairs. Look, Dad, she exclaimed one evening. You have jobs scheduled for the whole week. James stared at the colorful calendar, his heart swelling with pride and anxiety. That's right, sweetie, but it's a lot of responsibility. You can do it, Lily said with complete confidence. You're the best fixer in town. Then came the kitchen renovation project, his biggest job yet. The Andersons wanted their entire kitchen updated, From the cabinets to the countertop, James spent hours planning, measuring, and double-checking his calculation. "Are you sure about this?" he asked himself one night, studying the project plans spread across his bed. The scope of the work made his stomach churn. The next morning, he arrived at the Andersons' house early, his truck loaded with supplies. The project would take several days, and he couldn't afford any mistakes. He worked systematically, removing old cabinets, preparing surfaces, installing new fixtures. Each evening, he returned home exhausted but satisfied with his progress. Lily would ask for detailed updates, hanging on every word as he described the day's work. "Can we go see it when it's done?" she asked eagerly. "If the Andersons say it's okay," James promised. On the final day, James stood in the completed kitchen, checking every detail. The new cabinets gleamed, the countertops sparkled, and everything worked perfectly. Mrs. Anderson walked in, her eyes widening as she took in the transformation. "Oh, James," she breathed, running her hand along the smooth countertop. "It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful." Mr. Anderson joined them, nodding approvingly as he inspected the work. "Exceptional craftsmanship," he declared. "We'll definitely be recommending you to our friends." As James packed up his tools, Mrs. Anderson handed him a check, his largest payment yet. "You've earned every penny," she said warmly. "Thank you for making our dream kitchen a reality." Driving home, James felt a mix of relief, pride, and cautious optimism. The Anderson project proved he could handle bigger jobs. Maybe, just maybe, this business could really work. "Can I see the pictures?" Lily bounced excitedly when he walked through the door. James pulled out his phone, showing her the before and after photos of the kitchen renovation. "Wow," she whispered, her eyes wide. "You made it look like those fancy kitchens on TV." James looked at the photos again, seeing them through his daughter's eyes. The transformation was remarkable, and he had done that. He, James Palmer, had turned an outdated kitchen into something beautiful and functional. For the first time since starting this venture, he allowed himself to feel truly proud, not just of the work he'd done, but of taking this leap in the first place. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he had taken the first steps, and they were solid ones. James stood in front of his newly painted work van, running his fingers over the fresh lettering that read Palmer's Handyman Services. The morning sun caught the metallic finish, making the simple design shine. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. "Looking sharp, Palmer," called out Mike from the coffee shop next door. The friendly barista had been one of James's first regular customers, hiring him to fix various issues around the cafe. "Hey, while you're here, think you could take a look at that wobbly table near the window?" James nodded, grabbing his tool belt from the van. "Sure thing, Mike. Let me have a look." Inside the warm, coffee-scented shop, James knelt beside the troublesome table. The problem was simple enough. Just a loose bolt that needed tightening. As he worked, Mike brought him a steaming cup of coffee. "On the house," Mike said, setting it down nearby. "Say, have you met Sarah from the bookstore yet? She's been asking around for someone to help fix their shelving units." James took a grateful sip of the coffee. "No, haven't had the pleasure. Let me introduce you. She's right across the street." Mike waved through the window at a woman arranging books in the store's display. She noticed and waved back. A few minutes later, James found himself shaking hands with Sarah, a cheerful woman in her 40s with reading glasses perched on her head. She showed him around her charming bookstore, pointing out various maintenance issues that needed attention. "It's an old building," Sarah explained, gesturing to the vintage wooden shelves. "These units have character, but they need some love. Think you can help?" James ran his hand along the worn wood, already forming a plan. "Absolutely. We can reinforce these without losing their charm." As he worked up an estimate for Sarah, more customers entered the store. She introduced James to each of them, speaking highly of Mike's recommendation. Before he left, he had 3 more potential jobs lined up. That evening, during their weekly business review, James shared the day's developments with Megan over coffee at her house. She listened intently, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Word-of-mouth marketing is powerful in small towns," Megan noted, making notes in her planner. "Have you considered joining the local business association? It could help you network even more." James hesitated. "Wouldn't that mean monthly dues? I'm trying to keep expenses low." "Think of it as an investment," Megan explained patiently. "The connections you make could lead to steady work. Plus, they often share resources and advice." Taking her suggestion, James attended his first business association meeting the following week. The community center's meeting room was filled with familiar faces. Mike from the coffee shop, Sarah from the bookstore, and other local business owners he'd seen around town. Tom, the hardware store owner, clapped James on the shoulder. "About time you joined us. Been hearing good things about your work." During the meeting, James listened as other business owners shared their challenges and successes. When it was his turn to introduce himself, he felt nervous, but spoke from the heart about his journey, from odd jobs to starting his own business. After the meeting, several owners approached him. Linda, who ran the local bed and breakfast, needed help with ongoing maintenance. The owner of the pizza place wanted to discuss renovating his kitchen. James filled 3 pages of his notebook with potential leads. As his client list grew, James developed a routine. He'd start early, tackling the day's repairs and installations. Between jobs, he'd stop at Mike's for coffee, catching up on local news and leads. Sarah's bookstore became a regular stop too. She always seemed to know someone who needed his services. One particularly busy afternoon, James was replacing light fixtures at the bed and breakfast when Linda brought him some iced tea. "You know," she said, watching him work, "we all help each other around here. That's how small businesses survive." Last month, when my washing machine broke down, Tom from the hardware store stayed open late to get me the part I needed. And I send my guests to Mike's for coffee and Sarah's for books. James paused, thinking about how different this felt from his days of struggling alone. "I'm starting to see that," he admitted. "It's not just about the work, it's about being part of something bigger." That evening, he met with Megan to review his monthly finances. His numbers were improving steadily, and he had enough regular clients to feel secure about the coming months. "You're building something remarkable," Megan said, looking over his books. "Not just a business, but relationships. That's the foundation of long-term success." James nodded, thinking about all the connections he'd made. "I used to think asking for help or advice meant I was failing. Now I realize it's how we all grow." The next morning, James arrived early at his small office space, a modest room he'd recently started renting above the coffee shop. He sat at his desk, reviewing the day's schedule. His phone buzzed with a text from Tom about a customer needing urgent repairs, and another from Sarah about a new referral. Looking at his calendar, now filled with steady work and regular clients, James felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: genuine optimism about the future. His business wasn't just surviving, it was growing, built on a foundation of quality work and community connections. His tool belt felt lighter these days, even though he carried the same tools. Perhaps it was because he no longer carried the weight of doing everything alone. Every job, every handshake, every conversation with fellow business owners reinforced that he was on the right path. Mike knocked on his office door, bringing up the morning coffee. "Got another referral for you," he said with a grin. "Mrs. Johnson from the flower shop says her storage room needs some serious organization and shelving." James added it to his growing list of projects. "Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you looking out for me." "That's what neighbors do," Mike replied simply, heading back downstairs to his shop. James stood by his office window, watching the street below come to life as other businesses opened for the day. Sarah arranged her new window display, Tom unlocked the hardware store, and Linda walked past with fresh flowers from Mrs. Johnson's shop. They all waved to each other, a morning ritual in their small business community. For the first time since starting this venture, James felt truly confident about his decision. His phone buzzed again. Another potential client. He smiled, picked up his tools, and headed out to face the day's challenges, knowing he had a whole community behind him. James stood at his workbench, surrounded by tools and paperwork. The morning sun streamed through the garage windows, casting long shadows across the floor. His phone buzzed for the 3rd time that hour, another potential client requesting his services. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve and checked the time, 2:45 p.m. His heart sank. The parent-teacher meeting at Lily's school started in 15 minutes. He had promised her he wouldn't miss this one, but the Johnsons' kitchen renovation was behind schedule, and he still had 3 estimates to complete before tomorrow. "Just one more quote," he muttered, reaching for his calculator. The numbers blurred together as fatigue set in. He'd been up since 5 that morning, trying to get ahead of his growing workload. His phone rang again. This time, it was Lily's school. "Mr. Palmer?" Mrs. Thompson's voice was gentle but concerned. "I wanted to check if you're still coming to our meeting today. Lily's been waiting." James closed his eyes, guilt washing over him. "I'm so sorry. I got caught up with work. Could we reschedule?" There was a pause on the other end. "Of course, but..." Mrs. Thompson hesitated. "Lily seems quite disappointed. She worked very hard on her science project presentation. After hanging up, James sat heavily in his desk chair. The business was doing well, better than he'd expected. But success came with its own challenges. Every new client meant more paperwork, more scheduling, more estimates. He was drowning in administrative tasks, and his actual work, the hands-on repairs and renovations he loved, was suffering. That evening, Lily barely spoke during dinner. She pushed her mac and cheese around her plate, her usual cheerful chatter notably absent. "I'm really sorry about today, sweetheart," James said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "I'll make it up to you." Lily pulled her hand away. "You always say that," she mumbled. "You missed my science presentation. I built that solar system model all by myself." "I know, and I'm proud of you. It's just..." James struggled to find the right words. "The business is getting bigger, and there's so much to do." "You used to have time for me," Lily said quietly, her eyes filling with tears. "Now you're always working." Before James could respond, the doorbell rang. He opened it to find Megan standing there, holding a folder of paperwork. "I brought those insurance forms you asked about," she said, then noticed his troubled expression. "Is everything okay?" James invited her in, and they sat at the kitchen table while Lily retreated to her room. He explained the situation, the mounting workload, the missed parent-teacher conference, the guilt of letting his daughter down. Megan listened carefully, then opened her laptop. "Show me your scheduling system." James pulled up his calendar, a mess of overlapping appointments, and hastily scribbled notes. "It's not much of a system," he admitted. "James," Megan said gently, "you're trying to do the work of 3 people. You need help." "I can't afford to hire anyone right now," he protested. Actually, Megan pulled up his financial statements, which she'd been helping him manage. "Your revenue has increased by 40% in the last 2 months. You can absolutely afford a part-time assistant." James shook his head. "These are my clients, my responsibility. What if something goes wrong? And what about your responsibility to Lily?" Megan's voice was kind but firm. "You're missing important moments in her life because you're stretched too thin." She showed him a simple scheduling app on her laptop. "Look, a good assistant could handle your booking, paperwork, and client communications. That would free you up to focus on the actual work and being a father." James watched as she demonstrated how much more efficiently his business could run with proper organization and support. The numbers made sense, but the idea of trusting someone else with any part of his business made his stomach clench. "I don't know," he said, running a hand through his hair. "These clients trust me. What if..." "Dad?" Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching her science project, a carefully constructed model of the solar system. "Can I show you my presentation now?" James looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at the stack of paperwork waiting for him. Megan reached over and closed his laptop. "The paperwork can wait," she said softly. "This can't." As Lily explained how she'd researched and built each planet, James felt the weight of his earlier decision to miss her presentation. Her eyes lit up as she described the rings of Saturn, and he realized how much he'd been missing lately. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, James sat with Megan on the front porch. The evening air was cool, and crickets chirped in the darkness. "You're right," he said finally. "I need help. I've always handled everything myself." Megan nodded understanding. "Sometimes being a good leader means knowing when to delegate. It doesn't make you any less capable." James took a deep breath. "Okay, help me find someone." "I already have a few candidates in mind," Megan smiled. "Former administrative assistants looking for part-time work. We can start interviews next week." The thought of sharing his business responsibilities with a stranger still made James uncomfortable, but when he thought of Lily's disappointed face, he knew it was the right decision. He couldn't be everything to everyone, and trying to do so was causing him to fail at what mattered most. "Just part-time," he said firmly. "And they have to understand that my clients expect quality work." "Of course," Megan agreed. "We'll find someone who shares your values. The business is your baby. We'll make sure it's in good hands." James nodded, still uncertain but committed to making a change. He thought of all the school events and parent-teacher conferences ahead, all the moments in Lily's life he didn't want to miss. Maybe letting go a little wasn't such a bad thing after all. James stared at his phone, reading the email for the 5th time. His hands trembled as the words sank in. The Thompson renovation project, his biggest contract to date, was canceled. Just like that, 3 months of planned work vanished. He sat heavily in his worn office chair, the leather creaking under his weight. The small home office he'd set up in the corner of his living room suddenly felt suffocating. Spreadsheets and invoices scattered across his desk seemed to mock him. "This can't be happening," he muttered, running his fingers through his hair. The Thompsons' project would have covered his expenses for months. Now, the carefully planned budget he'd created lay in ruin. His phone buzzed again, another email, this time from his supplier, reminding him about the materials he'd already ordered for the Thompson job. Materials he'd have to pay for, whether he used them or not. The sound of cartoons drifted from Lily's room, where she was doing her homework. James glanced at his watch. Almost dinner time. How could he tell his daughter that the security he'd worked so hard to build was crumbling? He picked up his phone again, thumbs hovering over the keypad. Megan's number was right there in his recent calls. She'd know what to do. She always did. But his pride held him back. The same stubborn pride that had nearly cost him everything before. The doorbell rang, startling him from his thoughts. When he opened the door, Megan stood there, holding a bag of takeout. "I was in the neighborhood," she said with a warm smile that faded when she saw his face. "James, what's wrong?" He stepped aside to let her in. The words stuck in his throat. Lily's excited, "Aunt Megan," echoed from down the hall as she ran to greet their visitor. After Lily returned to her room with her portion of dinner, James and Megan sat at his small kitchen table. The Chinese food containers between them went untouched as he explained the situation. "The Thompsons said they're going with a bigger company," James said, his voice hollow. "Someone who can guarantee the work will be done faster. I've already ordered materials, hired extra help." He trailed off, staring at his cold noodles. Megan reached across the table, her hand resting near his but not touching. "James, let me help. I can." "No." He cut her off, perhaps too sharply. The memory of their previous conversations about pride and accepting help flashed through his mind. But this felt different. "I need to handle this myself. The business needs to stand on its own. Being independent doesn't mean being alone," Megan reminded him gently. "You've built something wonderful here. Don't let one setback destroy all that progress." James pushed his chair back and stood, pacing the small kitchen. "But what if this is just the beginning? What if other clients start backing out? I've got bills to pay, Lily to take care of." "Have you talked to any of your other clients? The ones who've become friends?" Megan asked. "Mark at the hardware store? Sarah from the cafe?" James paused his pacing. He hadn't thought about that. Over the past months, he'd built relationships with many local business owners. They'd shared advice, referred customers to each other, even helped each other out during busy times. "They might have leads on new projects," Megan continued, "or know someone who needs work done. You're not just a handyman anymore, James. You're part of this community." The truth of her words hit him hard. He'd been so focused on the loss that he'd forgotten about all he'd gained, not just in terms of business, but in relationships and support. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Mark from the hardware store, checking on an order. James stared at the screen, remembering how Mark had helped him source materials at better prices when he was just starting out. "I need to make some calls," he said finally. Megan nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Do what you need to do. But remember, asking for help isn't the same as asking for handouts. You've earned the right to lean on your friends." James spent the next hour on the phone, swallowing his pride and reaching out to his network. Mark knew of a restaurant owner looking to renovate their outdoor seating area. Sarah from the cafe had a cousin who needed bathroom repairs. Even his supplier agreed to let him return some of the materials ordered for the Thompson job. Each call reminded him that he wasn't alone in this journey. These weren't just business contacts. They were people who believed in him, who wanted to see him succeed. Still, as he sat back down at his desk later that evening, the weight of the canceled contract pressed heavy on his shoulders. The new leads would help, but they wouldn't completely fill the gap. His careful plans for growth would have to be scaled back. He opened his laptop, staring at the spreadsheet that tracked his business finances. The numbers seemed to blur together, each one representing a dream that now felt just out of reach. He'd come so far from those days at the bus stop, but in this moment, he felt that same sense of helplessness creeping back. Lily appeared in the doorway, already in her pajamas. "Dad, are you okay?" James managed a smile for his daughter. "Just some business stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." She walked over and hugged him, her small arms barely reaching around his shoulders. "You always tell me that when something goes wrong, we should try again tomorrow." Her simple wisdom brought tears to his eyes. He hugged her back, drawing strength from her innocent faith in him. She was right. Tomorrow was another day, another chance to rebuild. After putting Lily to bed, James sat alone in his living room. The defeat still stung, but something else stirred beneath it. Determination. He'd built this business from nothing, with help from people who believed in him. He wouldn't let one setback erase all that. He pulled out his phone one last time, sending a message to Megan. "Thank you for earlier. You were right about the community support. It's still going to be tough, but I'm not giving up." Her reply came quickly. "That's the James Palmer I know. We'll figure this out together." James set the phone down, his resolve strengthening. Tomorrow, he would start making new plans, reaching out to more contacts, finding ways to keep his business moving forward. The setback hurt, but it wouldn't define him or his future. James sat at his small kitchen table, surrounded by a mess of paperwork and bills. The morning sun filtered through the worn curtains, casting long shadows across the scattered documents. His shoulders slumped as he stared at the numbers that didn't add up. The lost contract had hit him harder than he wanted to admit. His phone buzzed. It was Megan. "How are you holding up?" Her voice carried genuine concern. James ran a hand through his hair. "I've been better," he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. Just a few months ago, he would have brushed off the question with a quick, "I'm fine." "I've been thinking," Megan said. "What if we created a promotional campaign for your business? Something to attract new clients?" James straightened in his chair. "What do you mean?" "Well, your work speaks for itself. The problem is getting people to see it. Have you considered offering a discount for first-time customers?" The idea had crossed his mind, but he'd been hesitant. "Wouldn't that eat into my profits?" "Sometimes you need to take a small step back to take a big leap forward," Megan explained. "Think of it as an investment in your future client base." James glanced at Lily's school picture on the refrigerator. Her smile reminded him why he couldn't give up. "You know what? You're right. I need to try something different." Over the next few days, James worked with renewed determination. He designed simple flyers advertising a 20% discount for new customers and posted them around town. He visited local businesses, introducing himself and leaving his business cards. The old James would have seen this as begging for work, but now he recognized it as smart business strategy. Mrs. Thompson, the owner of the local bakery, was the first to respond. "My kitchen cabinets have needed fixing for months," she said, examining his flyer. "And that discount makes it perfect timing." James threw himself into the cabinet repair job, making sure every detail was perfect. Mrs. Thompson was so pleased with his work that she recommended him to her sister, who needed her bathroom renovated. "You did such beautiful work," Mrs. Thompson told him, handing him a box of fresh cookies along with her payment. "My sister is going to love what you do with her bathroom." The referrals started coming in steadily. James found himself working longer hours, but this time with purpose rather than desperation. When jobs became too numerous, he remembered Megan's advice about delegation and hired Tom, a skilled carpenter, looking for part-time work. One afternoon, while James was finishing up a job, Megan stopped by with coffee. "How's the new business strategy working out?" James wiped his hands on his work pants and accepted the cup gratefully. "Better than I expected. The discount brought in new clients. But it's the word of mouth that's really helping." "That's wonderful," Megan beamed. "And how are you handling the workload?" "I took your advice about hiring help," James said, nodding toward Tom, who was measuring wood for the next project. "Having Tom around has been a game changer. I can take on more jobs without sacrificing quality." "You seem different," Megan observed, studying his face. "More at peace." James thought about it for a moment. "I guess I am. I've learned that accepting help doesn't make me less capable. If anything, it's made me better at what I do." "That's exactly what I've been trying to tell you," Megan said with a gentle smile. Later that week, James received a call from Marcus Green, a local real estate developer. "I've heard good things about your work," Marcus said. "I'm renovating a small apartment complex and need someone reliable for the repairs and upgrades. Would you be interested in bidding on the project?" James's heart raced. This was exactly the kind of opportunity he'd been hoping for. A major project that could secure his business's future. He arranged a meeting with Marcus for the following day. That evening, he called Megan. "I could use your advice on something," he said, explaining about the apartment complex project. "Send me the details," she replied without hesitation. "We'll go over them together and make sure your bid is competitive but profitable." They spent hours working on the proposal, with Megan sharing insights from her years of business experience. James absorbed every suggestion, grateful for her expertise. When they finished, he had a solid bid that he felt confident about. The next morning, James met with Marcus, presenting his proposal with a newfound assurance. He detailed his experience, showed photos of his previous work, and explained his approach to the renovation project. Marcus reviewed the bid carefully. "This is impressive, Mr. Palmer. Very thorough. I appreciate that you've included a timeline and detailed cost breakdown." He looked up with a smile. "I think we can work together." As James left the meeting with a signed contract in his hand, he felt a wave of emotion wash over him. This wasn't just a business victory. It was proof that he'd made the right choice in accepting help and guidance from others. His phone buzzed with a text from Megan. How did it go? Instead of texting back, he called her. "I got it," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "The apartment complex project? It's mine." "James, that's wonderful." Megan's joy was evident in her voice. "We should celebrate." "We?" James chuckled. "This wouldn't have happened without you, Megan. I know that now, and I'm not too proud to say it anymore." "You did the hard work," she replied. "I just helped you see what was possible." That evening, as James shared the good news with Lily over dinner, he felt a deep sense of contentment. His business wasn't just surviving anymore. It was growing, thriving even. And he had learned perhaps the most valuable lesson of all. True strength wasn't about standing alone, but about having the courage to lean on others when needed. Lily beamed at him from across the table. "Does this mean we can get a bigger apartment soon?" James laughed, reaching out to ruffle her hair. "Let's take it one step at a time, kiddo." But things are definitely looking up. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as James pulled up to Megan's mansion in his work truck. He'd just finished a job nearby and wanted to check on her since she'd missed their weekly coffee meeting. Something had felt off about her recent text messages, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He found her sitting in her garden, wrapped in a thick blanket despite the mild weather. Her usual vibrant energy seemed dimmed, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. "James," she said, managing a weak smile. "I wasn't expecting you today." "I was in the neighborhood." He settled into the chair beside her. "Is everything okay? You don't look well." Megan's hands tightened around her cup of tea. "I suppose I can't hide it anymore." She took a deep breath. "I went to the doctor last week. The test came back positive for pancreatic cancer." The words hit James like a physical blow. He sat there, stunned, as memories of his wife's battle with cancer flooded back. The endless hospital visits, the hopeful days followed by crushing setbacks, the way she'd grown weaker until— "How?" His voice cracked. "How bad is it?" "Stage 3. Megan's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she set down her tea. "The doctors are optimistic about treatment, but—" She shrugged, trying to maintain her composure. James reached over and took her hand. It felt cold despite the warm cup she'd been holding. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to burden you. You've been doing so well with the business, and She wiped at her eyes. "I guess I'm not used to letting people see me vulnerable." "That sounds familiar," James said softly, thinking of his own struggles to accept help. "But you taught me it's okay to lean on others. Let me be here for you now." Over the next hour, Megan shared her fears and concerns. She talked about her late husband's battle with cancer, how watching him slip away had nearly broken her. The money, the business, none of it mattered in those final days, she said. "All I wanted was more time." James listened, his heart aching. He saw past her wealthy exterior to the woman underneath, someone who had faced loss, who understood struggle, who had chosen to use her pain to help others like him. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately," Megan continued, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Not just the money or the business, but what really matters. When Tom died, I inherited all this wealth, but I felt so empty. Helping you, watching you build something meaningful, it's given me purpose." James stood up and adjusted her blanket, making sure she was warm enough. "You've done more than help me with the business, Megan. You've shown me what true friendship looks like, even though I practically forced it on you." She managed a weak laugh. "I needed the push," he admitted. "My pride was getting in the way of providing a better life for Lily. You saw that." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "Speaking of Lily, would you bring her by more often? She reminds me so much of the daughter I never had." "Of course." James sat back down, studying her face. "What can I do to help? Do you need rides to appointments? Help around the house?" "Just be here," she said softly. "The staff handles everything practical, but they can't give me what I really need. Someone who understands loss, who sees me as more than just my bank account." James squeezed her hand. "I'm not going anywhere. You were there for me when I hit rock bottom. Now it's my turn to return the favor." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. James thought about how much his life had changed since that day at the bus stop. He'd gone from viewing Megan as an intimidating wealthy stranger to seeing her as a dear friend who understood his struggles better than anyone. "You know what's ironic?" Megan said, breaking the silence. "I spent years trying to fill the void in my life with charitable donations and good deeds, but it wasn't until I stopped to help a stranger at a bus stop that I found what I was looking for: genuine connection." James felt tears prick at his eyes. "I'm glad you did. Even if I was too stubborn to appreciate it at first." "No more stubborn than I was about admitting I needed a friend," she replied. The corner of her mouth turned up in a small smile. "Life has a funny way of giving us what we need, doesn't it?" "It does," James agreed. "And whatever comes next, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this, Megan." They shared a look of understanding. Two people who had experienced profound loss, found unexpected friendship, and learned that true wealth had nothing to do with money. As the evening shadows lengthened, they sat together, drawing strength from their shared bond and the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply having someone who cares. James stared at the email on his phone screen, his heart sinking with each word. His main supplier, Henderson's Hardware, was raising their prices by 20%. The morning sun streamed through his kitchen window, but the warmth didn't reach him. He set his coffee mug down with trembling hands. "Dad?" Lily asked from across the breakfast table. "Are you okay?" He forced a smile. "Just some business stuff, sweetie. Nothing to worry about." But there was plenty to worry about. The price increase would eat into his already thin profit margins. He'd worked so hard to build his reputation as someone who offered quality work at fair prices. Now, he faced an impossible choice: raise his rates and risk losing customers, or keep his prices the same and watch his savings dwindle. James grabbed his toolbox and headed out for his first job of the day, fixing Mrs. Peterson's leaky faucet. As he drove, his mind raced with calculations. He'd need to adjust his entire business model. Maybe he could cut corners somewhere else? But the thought made his stomach turn. The memory of his first major project came flooding back. The kitchen renovation that had earned him glowing reviews. He'd promised himself then that he would never compromise on quality. It was what set him apart from the competition. His phone buzzed. It was Megan. "James, I was wondering if you'd like to grab lunch today?" He hesitated, then agreed. Maybe talking it through would help clear his head. They met at the small diner where they'd first had coffee together. Megan was already seated in a booth by the window, her face lighting up when she saw him. Despite her illness, she still maintained that warm, caring presence that had first drawn him to trust her. "You look troubled," she said as he slid into the booth. James ran a hand through his hair. "That obvious, huh? I've gotten pretty good at reading you over these past months." The waitress brought them water, and James took a long drink before explaining the situation. Megan listened intently, her hands folded on the table. "What are you thinking of doing?" she asked when he finished. "I don't know," he admitted. "I could raise my prices to match the increase, but..." He trailed off, staring out the window at passing cars. "But that's not who you are," Megan finished for him. "No, it's not," James sighed. "I built this business on being fair and honest. Some of my clients are struggling families, just like I was. They come to me because they know I'll give them a fair deal." Megan smiled. "You know, when my husband was building his company, he faced similar decisions. There were always opportunities to cut corners, to maximize profit at the expense of others. What did he do? He stayed true to his values." Megan's eyes grew distant with memory. "He used to say that money comes and goes, but your integrity, that's something you can never get back once it's gone." James thought about that as he picked at his sandwich. He remembered the relief on Mrs. Martinez's face when he'd given her a payment plan for her roof repair, the gratitude in Mr. Thompson's eyes when James had finished his bathroom renovation under budget. "But what if I can't make it work?" he asked quietly. "What if staying true to my values means losing everything I've built?" Megan reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "James, look how far you've come. When I first met you, you were barely getting by. Now you have a thriving business, loyal clients, and most importantly, you've shown Lily what it means to stand for something." James thought of his daughter, how proud she was when she told her friends about her dad's business, how she helped him organize his invoices in the evenings, learning about responsibility and hard work. "Sometimes," Megan continued, "the right decision isn't the easiest one, but it's the one you can live with." As they finished lunch, James felt the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. He knew what he had to do. That afternoon, he sat at his small desk in the corner of his living room, reviewing his finances. He could tighten his belt in other areas, maybe delay buying that new truck he'd been saving for, cut back on advertising since word of mouth was working well anyway. It would be tight, but he could absorb the price increase without raising his rates. He drafted an email to his clients, explaining that despite supplier increases, his commitment to fair pricing wouldn't change. As he hit send, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. Lily found him still at his desk later that evening. "Did you figure out the business stuff, Dad?" James pulled her into a hug. "Yeah, sweetie, I did. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy, but it's always worth it." That night, as James lay in bed, he thought about how far he'd come from that day at the bus stop. He learned that success wasn't just about making money. It was about building something you could be proud of, something that helped others along the way. His phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Proud of you. You're going to be just fine." James smiled in the darkness. For the first time since receiving that email from his supplier, he felt truly at peace. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, he knew he was facing them with his integrity intact. He closed his eyes, ready for a good night's sleep, knowing in his heart he'd made the right choice. The morning sun cast long shadows across James's workshop as he checked his phone messages. His heart sank as he listened to the third cancellation that week. Something wasn't right. These were confirmed jobs, clients who had seemed excited about working with him just days ago. "Dad?" Lily stood in the doorway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Are you okay? You look worried." James forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just some business stuff." He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. "Come on, let's get you to school." During the drive, his phone buzzed again. Another cancellation. This time, the client mentioned something that made his stomach churn. "I heard some concerning things about your work quality," the message read. After dropping Lily off, James drove straight to his next job site. As he pulled up to the modest suburban home, he noticed another contractor's van parked across the street. The competitor's logo, Elite Home Services, was emblazoned on its side in bold letters. Mrs. Thompson, his client, was waiting on her porch with an uncomfortable expression. "I'm sorry, James, but I've decided to go with someone else." She wrung her hands nervously. "I heard that you've been cutting corners on materials and overcharging customers." James felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "Mrs. Thompson, that's not true. Who told you that?" She glanced at the van across the street. "Well, Mark from Elite mentioned some things, and then I heard similar stories from others in the neighborhood." James's hands clenched into fists. Mark Stevens had been in business for years, dominating the local handyman market until James came along. Now it was clear what was happening. Mark was trying to destroy his reputation. Back in his truck, James called Megan. His voice shook as he explained the situation. "James, you need to confront this head-on," Megan said firmly. "I've dealt with people like Mark before. They prey on newer businesses, thinking they can bully them out of the market." "I can't afford to make enemies," James replied, watching Mark's van pull away. "What if he makes things worse?" "What's worse than losing your clients to lies?" Megan's voice softened. "Remember why you started this business. You wanted to build something honest, something your daughter could be proud of." James spent the rest of the morning making calls, trying to salvage his relationships with clients. Some were understanding, but others had already believed the rumors. By lunch, he was sitting in his favorite diner, pushing food around his plate when Megan walked in. She slid into the booth across from him, her face etched with concern. "How are you holding up?" "I've lost 6 jobs this week," James said, his voice hollow. "Everything I've built, it's falling apart because of some lies." "Then fight back," Megan urged. "Not with more lies or underhanded tactics, but with the truth. Your work speaks for itself, James." James stared out the window, watching people pass by on the sidewalk. "I'm angry," he admitted. "I want to go over there," and he trailed off, his jaw clenching. "That's exactly what he wants," Megan said. "He's trying to provoke you into doing something rash. Don't give him that satisfaction." As they talked, James's phone lit up with a text from a longtime client. "Heard some rumors. Want to hear your side before making any decisions. See?" Megan pointed at the message. "Your real clients, the ones who matter, they want the truth. Give it to them." James nodded slowly, feeling some of his fear transform into determination. "I need to talk to Mark directly," he said. "Clear the air." "Just remember to stay professional," Megan cautioned. "You're better than his tactics." That afternoon, James drove to Elite Home Services. His heart pounded as he parked his truck, but he forced himself to remain calm. Mark was in the front office, a smug smile spreading across his face as James walked in. "Well, well," Mark said, leaning back in his chair. Rough week? James took a deep breath. We need to talk about these rumors you're spreading. Just business, Palmer, Mark shrugged. Nothing personal. Maybe you're just not cut out for this line of work. My work speaks for itself, James said evenly, though his hands were trembling. I have photos, references, and satisfied customers who can vouch for my quality. What you're doing isn't just wrong, it's unprofessional. Mark's smile faltered slightly. You coming here to threaten me? No, James replied, maintaining eye contact. I'm here to tell you that I'm not going anywhere. I've worked too hard to build this business the right way. You can either compete fairly, or you can continue spreading lies. But if you choose lies, I'll make sure every client knows exactly what kind of business you really run. He placed a folder on Mark's desk, photos of his completed projects, testimonials from satisfied customers, and receipts showing his fair pricing and quality materials. The choice is yours, James said quietly. But I suggest you focus on your own work, instead of trying to tear down mine. Mark's face reddened, but something in James's steady gaze made him pause. After a long moment, he nodded curtly. We'll see how things play out. As James walked back to his truck, his phone buzzed. It was the text from his earlier client. Just had an interesting conversation with Mark. He seems to be backtracking on those rumors. You free to look at my project next week? James smiled, feeling the weight of the past few days lifting slightly. He had faced his fear, stood his ground, and done it without compromising who he was. As he drove home, he realized that sometimes the strongest response to negativity was simply staying true to yourself. The morning sun filtered through the workshop windows as James organized his tools, each one carefully placed in its designated spot. The space, once just a rented garage, now felt like a second home. Photos of completed projects lined one-wall kitchen, renovations, deck builds, and intricate carpentry work, each representing not just a job well done, but a relationship built with someone in the community. His phone buzzed with a new message. Another 5-star review had come in from Mrs. Henderson, praising his work on her bathroom remodel. James smiled, remembering how nervous he'd been about taking on such a big project just a few months ago. Now, it was just another success story in his growing portfolio. Dad! Lily's voice echoed through the workshop as she bounded in, her backpack bouncing. Look what I got on my math test. She thrust a paper toward him, beaming with pride. An A+ marked in red at the top. That's amazing, sweetheart. James pulled her into a tight hug, his heart swelling. These moments meant everything to him, now being able to be there when she got home from school, having the flexibility to attend her events, no longer missing the important moments in her life. The workshop phone rang, and James answered professionally. Palmer Home Services. This is James speaking. It was Mr. Rodriguez from the local hardware store, calling to let him know a special order of materials had arrived early. James remembered a time when he couldn't afford to place special orders, when he had to make do with whatever was on sale. After hanging up, he noticed Lily studying the wall of photos. Remember when you first started? She asked, pointing to one of his earliest projects, a simple bookshelf repair for the library. I sure do, James replied, walking over to stand beside her. I was so scared of messing up back then. But Megan helped you believe in yourself, Lily said matter-of-factly, with the wisdom that sometimes only children possess. James nodded, thinking about how far he'd come. These days, he had a steady stream of clients, many of whom came through word-of-mouth recommendations. He'd even hired Tony, a part-time assistant who helped with the bigger jobs. The thought of delegating work would have terrified him before, but now he understood that accepting help made him stronger, not weaker. Later that afternoon, James met with the Wilsons, a young couple looking to renovate their first home. As he walked them through their options, he found himself sharing knowledge he'd gained over the months, not just about construction, but about making a house feel like a home. We've heard great things about you from the Petersons, Mrs. Wilson said warmly. They said you treated their home like it was your own. James felt a surge of pride, not the defensive kind he used to carry, but a quiet satisfaction in knowing he'd earned their trust. Every project matters, he replied, because it's not just about fixing things, it's about helping people build their lives. After the meeting, he drove to Megan's house for their weekly coffee catch-up. Her garden was in full bloom, a riot of colors that always lifted his spirits. She answered the door with her usual warm smile, though he could see the toll her illness was taking in the slight tremor of her hands. The business is doing well, he told her as they sat in her sunroom, steam rising from their coffee cups. We just landed the Wilson project. I knew you could do it. Megan said, her eyes twinkling. You've always had the skill, James. You just needed to believe in yourself. I couldn't have done it without you, he admitted freely, no longer feeling diminished by acknowledging her help. But you know what's funny? These days, I'm the one giving advice to others. The Henderson's son is thinking of starting his own landscaping business, and they asked me to talk to him about it. Megan nodded approvingly. That's how community works, James. We lift each other up. As they talked, James realized how naturally their relationship had evolved. Megan was still there with advice when he needed it, but she'd step back, letting him make his own decisions, his own mistakes, and find his own solutions. She'd become more than a mentor, she was family. That evening, back at home, James sat at his desk reviewing the week's schedules. The calendar was full but not overwhelming. He'd learned to balance his workload, to price his services fairly, and to value his time as much as his clients. The stack of bills that once terrified him now represented manageable responsibilities rather than insurmountable obstacles. Lily appeared in the doorway of his home office holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. I made you some, she said, placing one beside him. You look happy, Dad. James pulled her into a one-armed hug. I am happy, sweetheart. We've come a long way, haven't we? Yeah, she agreed, sipping her hot chocolate. And you don't look worried all the time anymore. Her observation struck him. She was right. The constant weight of anxiety he'd carried for so long had lifted. He still faced challenges, but they no longer seemed like potential disasters. Instead, they were just problems to solve, opportunities to learn and grow. Looking around his modest but comfortable home office, at the drawings Lily had made for him tacked to the wall, at the business licenses and certifications he'd earned, at the photos of happy clients and completed projects, James felt a deep sense of contentment. His success wasn't measured in dollars alone, but in the strength of the relationships he'd built, the trust he'd earned, and the example he was setting for his daughter. The journey hadn't been easy, and he knew there would be more challenges ahead, but now he faced them with confidence, knowing that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness, and that true strength often came from the connections we make with others. His business was thriving not just because of his skills, but because he'd learned to be part of something bigger than himself, a community that supported each other through both struggles and successes. James closed his laptop and turned to Lily. How about we watch a movie together? Her face lit up. Can we have popcorn too? Absolutely, he smiled, standing up. As they walked to the kitchen together, James felt profound gratitude for everything. The struggles that had taught him humility, the support that had shown him the power of community, and the success that had come not from trying to do everything alone, but from learning to accept help and give it in return. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Megan's study, casting long shadows across the antique desk where she sat, surrounded by financial documents and folders. Her fingers traced the edge of a particularly important paper, the latest valuation of her Amazon stock holdings. She'd been staring at these numbers for days now, but today felt different. Today, she was ready to make a decision that would change not just her life, but potentially many others. James sat across from her in a comfortable leather chair, his work clothes replaced with casual weekend wear. He'd come over at Megan's request, and now watched as she gathered her thoughts, her expression both nervous and determined. I've been thinking a lot about purpose lately, Megan began, her voice soft but steady. When Thomas left me all this wealth, I felt lost, like I was just a caretaker of numbers on a page. She picked up the document and held it up. But watching you these past months, James, seeing how hard you've worked, how you've grown your business, how you've never lost sight of what really matters, it's inspired me. James leaned forward, his expression curious. What are you planning, Megan? She took a deep breath and smiled. I'm selling a significant portion of my Amazon stock. It's time this money did some real good in the world. James's eyebrows shot up. That's a big decision. Are you sure? More sure than I've been about anything in a long time, Megan replied, standing up to pace near the window. I want to start a foundation, something focused on helping single parents, small business owners, people who just need a chance to make their dreams real. She turned to face James. People like you. James shifted in his chair, processing her words. But your wealth, it's your security. I don't want you to risk that because of me. Megan laughed softly. Oh, James, even if I sold half my holdings, I'd still have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. But this isn't about you, not entirely. She walked back to her desk and sat down. When I helped you, something changed in me. For the first time since Thomas died, I felt like I was doing something meaningful with his legacy. James nodded slowly, understanding filling his features. You want to help others the same way you helped me. Exactly, Megan said, pulling out a folder filled with preliminary plans. I've been working with my financial advisors. We've structured it so the foundation will be sustainable. We'll offer microloans, business guidance, emergency assistance, real, practical help for people who just need a boost to get started. As she spoke, her eyes lit up with enthusiasm. James couldn't help but smile, remembering how lost and uncertain he'd felt before Megan had entered his life. You know, he said, when we first met, I thought you were just another rich person trying to feel good about themselves by throwing money at problems. Megan chuckled. And now? Now I know better, James replied earnestly. You didn't just give me money. You gave me confidence, support, friendship. That's what made the difference. That's exactly what I want this foundation to be about, Megan said, spreading out some papers on her desk. Not just writing checks, but creating real connections, real support systems. They spent the next hour going through her plans. Megan had thought of everything, from the legal structure to the application process, from mentorship programs to emergency funds. As she explained each detail, James offered insights from his own experience, suggesting ways to make the support more accessible and effective. You know, Megan said, pausing in her explanation, I never thought I'd feel this excited about anything again after Thomas died. The money just felt like a burden, a reminder of what I'd lost. She looked at James with grateful eyes. But meeting you, helping you, it showed me that I could honor his memory by doing something meaningful with what he left me. James nodded, understanding completely. Sometimes the best way to deal with loss is to create something new from it. He thought of his own journey, how his struggles after losing his wife had eventually led him to this moment, to building something better for himself and Lily. Exactly, Megan agreed. She pulled out another document. And speaking of creating something new, I want you to be part of this, James. Me? James looked surprised. How? I want you to be on the advisory board, Megan explained. You've lived through exactly what our recipients will be experiencing. Your perspective would be invaluable. James sat back, overwhelmed by the offer. I don't know, Megan. I'm just a handyman who got lucky. No, Megan said firmly. You're someone who worked incredibly hard, who learned to accept help without losing your dignity, who built something sustainable from nothing. That's exactly the kind of experience we need. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting warm light across the room. Outside, birds chirped in the garden, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees. You know what's funny? James finally said. When I fainted at that bus stop, I thought it was the lowest point of my life. I was so embarrassed, so angry at myself for being in that position. Megan smiled softly. And now I think it might have been the best thing that ever happened to me, James replied. Not just because of the help you gave me, but because it taught me that sometimes the things we think are breaking us are actually rebuilding us into something better. That's beautiful, James, Megan said, her eyes growing misty. And that's exactly what I want this foundation to be about, helping people through those breaking points, showing them that there's hope on the other side. They sat together in Megan's study, surrounded by papers that would soon transform into real help for real people. Through the window, they could see the garden where they'd first started to become friends, where James had first begun to trust that accepting help didn't mean losing himself. Now they were planning to extend that same trust, that same hope, to others. So, Megan said, gathering up the papers into neat piles, are you in? James looked at her, at this woman who had changed his life, not just through her money, but through her friendship and faith in him. He smiled and nodded. I'm in. James stood backstage at the local community center, his hands trembling as he adjusted his tie. The small auditorium was packed with familiar faces, local business owners, clients, and community members. Through the curtain, he could hear the soft murmur of conversation. You'll do great, Dad, Lily whispered, giving his hand a squeeze. At 13 now, she had grown into a thoughtful young lady who still possessed that same gentle spirit that had helped guide him through their darkest days. Megan sat in a chair nearby, her eyes twinkling with pride despite the fatigue that showed on her face. Her illness had taken its toll, but her spirit remained undiminished. Just speak from your heart, James, she said softly. That's all anyone needs to hear. The event organizer, Sarah Thompson from the Chamber of Commerce, approached with a clipboard. Ready, Mr. Palmer? You're up in 5 minutes. James nodded, though his throat felt dry. Public speaking had never been his strong suit. He was more comfortable with a wrench in his hand than a microphone. But when they'd asked him to share his story at the Small Business Success Series, he knew he couldn't refuse. He owed it to everyone who had helped him along the way. The lights dimmed, and Sarah walked onto the stage. "Tonight's speaker started with nothing but a toolbox and a dream," she began. "Today, Palmer's Home Services employs 15 people and serves our entire county. Please welcome James Palmer." The applause felt surreal as James walked onto the stage. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience, but he could make out Lily and Megan in the front row. Their presence gave him strength. He cleared his throat and adjusted the microphone. "4 years ago, I fainted at a bus stop," he began, his voice shaky at first but growing stronger. "I was a single dad working 3 jobs, too proud to ask for help and too stubborn to admit I was drowning." The room fell silent, and James continued, "That day changed my life, not because I fell, but because someone helped me up, someone who taught me that true strength isn't about carrying every burden alone. It's about having the courage to let others help you carry them." He glanced at Megan, who dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I learned that wealth isn't just about money in the bank. It's about the richness of relationships, the value of community, and the power of perseverance." James shared the story of starting his business, describing the long hours, the setbacks, and the small victories. He talked about the local business owners who had become mentors and friends, some of whom were sitting in the audience nodding along. "There were times I wanted to give up," he admitted, "times when a client would cancel, or a job would go wrong, or the bills would pile up. But I had something more valuable than money. I had people who believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." He spoke about learning to delegate, about hiring his first employee, about the pride he felt when he could finally provide a stable life for Lily. "My daughter never complained about our struggles," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She just kept loving me, kept believing in me. She taught me that sometimes the strongest people in our lives are the ones who never stop seeing the best in us." The audience listened intently as James described how his business had grown, not just in size, but in purpose. "We don't just fix houses," he explained. "We help build homes. We restore hope. Every broken pipe, every worn-out floor, every creaky door, they're all opportunities to show people that someone cares about their comfort and safety." He shared stories about clients who had become friends, about employees who had grown alongside the business, about the community that had embraced him. "Success isn't a solo journey," he said. "It's built on trust, on relationships, on the willingness to both give and receive help." Looking directly at Megan, James continued, "Sometimes angels come disguised as strangers on a bus. Sometimes the greatest gifts aren't the ones that come with dollar signs, but the ones that come with understanding, patience, and unconditional support." His voice grew stronger as he reached the heart of his message. "I stand here today not as a success story, but as a testament to the power of community. Every person in this room has the potential to lift someone else up, to be the hand that helps someone off the ground, to be the voice that says, 'I believe in you,' when all other voices say give up." James gripped the podium, his eyes scanning the familiar faces before him. "My business may have my name on it, but it belongs to all of you, to the clients who trusted me with their homes, to the employees who trusted me with their livelihoods, to the mentors who trusted me with their wisdom." He paused, letting his gaze rest on Lily and Megan. "And most of all, to the 2 people who never stopped believing in me, even when I had stopped believing in myself. They taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the lives we touch and the love we share." The applause started slowly, then built to a crescendo. James saw people rising to their feet, saw tears in eyes and smiles on faces. But most importantly, he saw understanding, the recognition that his story wasn't just about business success, but about the transformative power of human connection. As he stepped away from the podium, James felt a profound sense of fulfillment. His journey had come full circle, from that desperate man at the bus stop to someone who could now inspire others. He had found his voice, his purpose, and his place in the community. And in sharing his story, he hoped others would find the courage to accept help, to persist through challenges, and to believe in the power of human kindness. The evening sun cast a warm, golden glow through the windows of Megan's spacious backyard patio. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, their soft light mixing with the natural sunset. The sound of cheerful conversation and laughter filled the air as friends, family, and colleagues gathered to celebrate both James's thriving handyman business and Megan's new philanthropic foundation. James stood near the grill, expertly flipping burgers while chatting with some of his regular clients who had become friends over the past months. Lily darted between groups of guests, her face beaming with pride as she overheard people praising her father's work. "Your dad's really something special," one of James's clients told Lily. "He fixed our kitchen cabinet last week, and it's better than new." Lily nodded enthusiastically. "He can fix anything," she declared, making the small group around her chuckle warmly. Across the patio, Megan was deep in conversation with her financial advisors, who had helped her structure her new charitable foundation. Her face glowed with enthusiasm as she discussed her plans to help other struggling single parents and small business owners. "The paperwork should be finalized by next week," one advisor said, "and then we can start accepting applications for grants." James caught snippets of their conversation while he worked the grill, and he couldn't help but smile. The woman who had once seemed so intimidating with her wealth had become one of his closest friends and strongest supporters. As the evening progressed, everyone gathered around the long tables Megan had set up on the patio. The spread was impressive but purposefully casual. Burgers, salads, and homemade sides that James and Lily had prepared together. It was important to both James and Megan that the celebration feel welcoming and unpretentious. After everyone had filled their plates, Megan clinked her glass with a spoon, drawing attention from the gathered guests. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, her voice warm with emotion, "to new beginnings, to following our dreams, and most importantly, to the power of friendship and community." The guests raised their glasses in agreement, and James felt a lump form in his throat. Looking around at the faces of people who had supported him through his journey, from clients who had given him his first chances to fellow business owners who had offered advice, he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. As the meal continued, stories were shared and memories recalled. One of James's first clients told the story of how he had fixed their broken fence in the middle of a rainstorm, refusing to leave until the job was done properly. Others chimed in with their own tales of his dedication and craftsmanship. "Remember when you wouldn't even let me buy you groceries?" Megan teased James good-naturedly, causing him to blush slightly. "Well, look how far we've come," he replied with a grin, gesturing to the gathering around them. As the evening wore on and the sky darkened to a deep purple, the party began to naturally wind down. Families with young children said their goodbyes, and business associates drifted away with warm handshakes and promises to keep in touch. Finally, when only a few close friends remained, chatting quietly in small groups, Megan caught James's eye and nodded toward the garden. They walked together along the winding path, the sounds of the party growing fainter behind them. "I can't believe how much has changed," James said softly, looking up at the emerging stars. Megan smiled, her eyes twinkling in the lantern light. "I'm so proud of you, James. You've built something remarkable." "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted, no longer feeling the sting of pride that would have once accompanied such words. "Oh, I think you could have," Megan countered, "but I'm glad I got to be part of it. You've taught me so much about perseverance and dignity, working with other small business owners through the foundation. It all started with you, you know." They reached a small bench nestled among flowering bushes, and both sat down. The evening air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine. "When I fainted at that bus stop," James remembered, shaking his head with a slight laugh, "I never imagined it would lead to all this." "Life has a funny way of working out," Megan agreed. "Sometimes our lowest moments lead us to exactly where we need to be." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of laughter from the patio. Lily's voice carried clearly as she told a joke, followed by appreciative chuckles from the remaining guests. "She's flourishing," Megan observed. "You've given her such a strong foundation." James nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "She's my whole world. Everything I've done has been for her. And now look at you both. You're not just surviving anymore, you're thriving." Megan's voice was warm with affection. From the patio came the sound of more laughter, bright and genuine. James and Megan shared a knowing look, both grateful for the joy that filled this moment. The celebration wasn't just about business success or charitable foundations. It was about the connections they'd formed, the lives they'd touched, and the community they'd built together. As they walked back toward the patio, James felt a deep sense of contentment. The gathering was everything he could have hoped for: simple, heartfelt, and full of genuine happiness. Around the tables, the remaining guests were sharing dessert and trading stories, their faces lit by the soft glow of the lanterns. James sat at their small kitchen table, watching as Lily carefully arranged her peas into a neat pattern on her plate. The warm glow of their overhead light cast a cozy atmosphere over their modest apartment. Outside, the evening sun painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks, filtering through their kitchen window. "Dad," Lily said, looking up from her artistic food arrangement, "do you remember when we used to eat dinner in front of the TV because we were always in such a rush?" James nodded, a gentle smile crossing his face. "I do, sweetie. Things were pretty hectic back then, weren't they?" "Yeah," Lily agreed, finally taking a bite of her dinner. "I like this better, just us talking." The simple observation touched James's heart. He watched his daughter, noting how much she'd grown in the past year. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her eyes held a wisdom that sometimes caught him off guard. She looked so much like her mother. "Me too, Lily Pad," he said, using his old nickname for her. "Speaking of talking, how's that science project coming along?" Lily's face lit up. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson said my idea about testing different types of soil for plant growth was really good. She thinks I might even have a chance at winning the science fair." "That's wonderful." James felt a surge of pride. "You know, I was thinking maybe we could build a proper display stand for your project this weekend. I've got some leftover wood from the Johnsons' renovation that would be perfect." "Really?" Lily bounced in her seat. "Could we paint it too?" "Of course we can. Any color you want." They continued eating, sharing stories about their day. James told her about a particularly challenging repair job he'd completed, and Lily shared a funny incident from recess. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences and genuine laughter. As they finished their meals, Lily helped clear the table without being asked. James watched her carefully stack the dishes in the sink, struck by how responsible she'd become. There was a time when he'd worried constantly about whether he was doing enough as a single parent, whether Lily was missing out on too much. But looking at her now, he saw a happy, well-adjusted child who had grown into herself despite their struggles. "Hey, Dad?" Lily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She was drying her hands on a kitchen towel, looking thoughtful. "Can I tell you something?" "Always, sweetheart." James pulled out a chair for her to sit back down. Lily settled into the seat, fidgeting slightly with the edge of the tablecloth. "Remember when things were really hard, and you were always tired and worried?" James's heart tightened a little, but he nodded. "I remember. Well, I just wanted you to know that even then, I knew everything would be okay." She looked up at him with earnest eyes. "Because you always tried your best, and you never gave up. And now look at us. We have good food, and you're not tired all the time, and we can do fun things together." James felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He reached across the table and took Lily's small hand in his. "You're pretty amazing, you know that? Sometimes I think you're the one who's been taking care of me all this time." Lily giggled. "We take care of each other, Dad. That's what family does." The simple truth in her words struck him deeply. They did take care of each other, in ways both big and small. Through all the hardships, through all the moments of doubt and fear, their bond had only grown stronger. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" he asked, genuinely curious about her dreams. Lily thought for a moment, her nose scrunching up in concentration. I think I want to help people, like you do. Maybe I'll be a doctor, or a teacher, or..." She paused, grinning. "Maybe I'll fix things like you." James chuckled. "You can be anything you want to be, Lily, and I'll be right here to support you every step of the way." "I know," she said with complete confidence. "That's why I'm not scared to dream big." They spent the next hour sitting at the kitchen table, talking about everything and nothing. Lily shared her hopes for middle school next year, her ideas for future science projects, and her dreams of maybe having a garden someday. James listened intently, his heart full of love and gratitude for this remarkable little person who had changed his life in so many ways. When bedtime approached, Lily didn't protest as she usually did. Instead, she got ready for bed without complaint, brushing her teeth and changing into her favorite pajamas with the cartoon characters on them. James followed their nightly routine, tucking her into bed and making sure her stuffed animals were arranged just the way she liked them. As he pulled the covers up to her chin, Lily looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Dad?" she murmured. "Yes, sweetheart? I'm really happy we're us." James felt his heart swell with emotion. He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. "Me too, Lily Pad. Me too." He watched as she snuggled deeper into her pillow, her breathing already evening out into the rhythm of sleep. Standing there in the soft glow of her nightlight, James felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. Their life might not be perfect, and they might not have everything, but they had what mattered most, each other. James stood in his newly expanded workshop, running his calloused fingers along the smooth wooden surface of his latest project. The morning sun streamed through the large windows he'd recently installed, casting intricate golden patterns across the polished concrete floor. Tools hung in perfect order on the custom pegboard system he'd built himself, each one in its designated place after months of organizing and reorganizing. The rich smell of fresh cedar shavings mingled with the lingering scent of wood stain, creating an atmosphere that never failed to fill him with satisfaction. It was everything he'd dreamed of during those long, sleepless nights in his cramped apartment. Yet somehow it exceeded even his wildest imagination. The familiar sound of tires crunching on gravel outside made him pause in his work, a genuine smile spreading across his face. He knew it was Megan. She always arrived precisely at 9 o'clock for their weekly meetings, a habit that had developed over the past several months. These gatherings had evolved far beyond simple business discussions about profit margins and client schedules. They had become sacred moments where two unlikely friends shared their deepest dreams, their most fragile hopes, and their carefully crafted plans for a future neither had dared to envision alone. "James?" Megan's melodic voice called out as she pushed through the workshop's heavy oak door, the one he'd custom-made with beveled glass panels. She looked remarkably better today, her cheeks carrying a healthy pink flush that had been absent for weeks. The experimental treatments were clearly working their magic, and her renewed vitality showed in every graceful step and animated gesture. "Back here," he called out, wiping his hands methodically on the leatherwork apron Lily had saved up to buy him for his birthday, just putting the finishing touches on a custom bookshelf for the Thompson family. Their daughter starts college next fall, and they wanted something special for her dorm room. Megan approached with careful steps, her eyes immediately drawn to the exquisite craftsmanship of the piece. The bookshelf stood nearly 6 feet tall, crafted from rich walnut with hand-carved botanical details along the edges. "James, this is absolutely breathtaking," she whispered, running her manicured fingers along the intricate vine patterns he'd spent countless hours perfecting. "You've traveled such an incredible distance from those early days of fixing broken chairs and wobbly tables in your tiny apartment." James set down his sandpaper and nodded slowly, feeling a powerful surge of pride wash over him like warm sunshine. Who would have imagined that a chance meeting at a bus stop, me collapsing from hunger right in front of you, would eventually lead to all this? Sometimes I still can't believe it's real. They settled into their established positions in the workshop's comfortable conversation area, James perching on the edge of his sturdy workbench, Megan lowering herself gracefully into the high-backed chair he'd specially designed and built for her, complete with perfect lumbar support and armrests positioned at exactly the right height. The morning light filtered through the windows, catching the distinguished silver threads in her carefully styled hair and reminding him of just how much time had passed since that fateful first encounter that changed both their lives forever. "I've been doing a great deal of thinking lately," Megan began, her hazel eyes practically sparkling with barely contained excitement. "That foundation we've discussed so many times. I want to stop talking and start acting. I want to move forward with it immediately. My vision is to help other single parents start their own businesses, providing them with the same kind of support and guidance that transformed your life." James leaned forward on his workbench, his full attention focused on her animated expression. "Tell me everything you're thinking." "Well, your remarkable story could serve as the perfect blueprint for others," she continued, her voice gaining momentum with each word. "Not just basic financial support, but comprehensive mentorship, ongoing guidance, and most importantly, a genuine community where people can lean on each other without shame or judgment. I have already spent considerable time speaking with my financial advisors about converting a substantial portion of my Amazon stock holdings into a dedicated fund for this exact purpose." "Megan, that's absolutely incredible," James said, his voice growing thick with overwhelming emotion. "You're going to fundamentally change so many lives, touch so many families who are struggling just like I was." "We are going to change lives," she corrected him firmly, her eyes meeting his with unwavering determination. "I need you to be an integral part of this foundation, James. Your lived experience, your personal journey from desperation to success, it's completely invaluable. You understand what these struggling families are enduring on a daily basis in ways I never could, despite all my wealth and good intentions." James stood up from his workbench and walked slowly to the large picture window, gazing out at the bustling street scene below. His workshop occupied prime real estate in the heart of downtown now, a dramatic change from the cramped corner of his old apartment where he'd started this journey with nothing but determination and a few basic tools. "You know, I used to genuinely believe that asking for help made me fundamentally weak," he said quietly, his breath fogging the glass slightly, Now I finally understand that accepting help actually made me infinitely stronger than I ever was alone. Megan rose from her chair and joined him at the window, standing close enough that he could smell her subtle lavender perfume. That's precisely the lesson we need to teach others who are trapped in the same cycle of pride and desperation. Stubborn pride can become such an insurmountable barrier to real growth and positive change. And the power of genuine community? James added thoughtfully, watching people hurry past on the sidewalk below. I never truly realized how desperately I needed connection and support until I finally had it. Not just you, but literally everyone, my clients who trusted me with their homes, other business owners who shared their wisdom, even the people who initially doubted my abilities. Every single person played a crucial part in getting me to where I stand today. They spent the next 2 hours immersed in detailed discussions about the foundation's structure and mission, how to organize the application process, which families to help first, what kinds of comprehensive support to offer beyond simple financial assistance. James found himself growing more excited and energized with each passing minute, his mind racing with possibilities. This represented so much more than just another business venture. It was a precious opportunity to give back meaningfully, to help other desperate parents find their own paths to independence and dignity, just as he had. You know what Lily told me just the other day? James smiled broadly, remembering their conversation over breakfast. She looked at me with those serious eyes of hers and announced that she wants to run her own business someday, just like her dad. Can you even believe that kind of confidence from a 9-year-old? Megan's entire face lit up with pure joy, her eyes crinkling at the corners. She's constantly watching you, James, absorbing every lesson you teach through your actions. That's the real legacy we're building here together, showing the next generation exactly what becomes possible when you combine relentless hard work with unwavering hope and the courage to accept help when it's offered. James nodded emphatically, feeling the profound truth of her words settle deep in his chest. And speaking of hope and courage, he said, turning to face her directly, "How are you feeling today? I mean, really feeling. Not just the polite answer you give everyone else." Megan's radiant smile softened into something more vulnerable and genuine. "Honestly, I'm feeling better than I have in months. The doctors are increasingly optimistic about my prognosis, which is wonderful news. But more importantly than my physical health, I feel truly purposeful for the first time since my husband died. This foundation, working closely with you, dedicating myself to helping other families, it gives me something meaningful to focus on beyond my illness and my own mortality. You've given me absolutely everything. Hope, opportunity, friendship, a future I never dared to imagine," James said, his voice earnest and filled with gratitude. "Please let me help you build this dream into reality. Together, we'll create something truly amazing that will outlast both of us." They moved away from the window to his large oak desk, where blueprints for upcoming furniture projects lay scattered across the surface in organized chaos. But today, they weren't examining designs for dining room tables or bedroom sets. Instead, they were sketching out comprehensive plans for the foundation, drawing up detailed ideas for how to reach more struggling families, how to expand into different communities, how to measure their impact and ensure lasting change. "You know what I've learned through this entire incredible journey?" James said, picking up a pencil to jot down notes in the margins of their planning documents. "Hope isn't just about passively believing that things will eventually get better on their own. Real hope is about having the courage and determination to actively make them better, even when the situation seems completely impossible." Megan reached across the cluttered desk and squeezed his work-roughened hand with both of hers, and having the wisdom and humility to accept help gracefully along the way, recognizing that none of us can succeed entirely alone. They worked steadily through the entire morning, their shared excitement and energy growing exponentially with each detail they planned and refined. The foundation would start small and humble, just like James's handyman business had begun, but they both possessed an unshakable conviction that it had the potential to grow into something truly extraordinary that would touch countless lives. As the sun climbed higher in the clear sky, painting everything in warm golden light, they found themselves standing once again at the workshop's expansive front window. The street outside bustled with constant activity, people hurrying to work, parents pushing strollers, elderly couples walking hand in hand, teenagers laughing together. Each person carried their own unique story, their own private struggles, their own carefully guarded dreams and desperate hopes for something better. "Look at all of them," Megan said softly, her voice filled with compassion and possibility. So many people just waiting patiently for their chance, their moment of opportunity, just like you were waiting at that bus stop. James nodded slowly, feeling a deep sense of purpose and responsibility settle over him like a warm, comfortable blanket. And now we're going to help them find that chance, one family at a time. They stood there together in comfortable silence, watching the world continue its daily rhythm outside their window, each lost in profound thoughts about the future they were building with their own hands. It wasn't just about business success anymore, or even about personal achievement and financial security. It was about creating something lasting and meaningful, something that would continue helping desperate families long after they were both gone from this world. The brilliant morning light streamed through the window, warm and bright and full of promise, like the hope they both felt burning in their hearts for what lay ahead. In that perfect moment, standing beside Megan in his dream workshop, James felt the full weight of how far he'd traveled from that desperate man who'd collapsed from hunger at a bus stop and the endless, beautiful possibilities of where they could go together from here. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Megan's study, casting warm patches of golden light across the polished wooden desk where she and James sat surrounded by neat stacks of papers and carefully drawn plans. The room smelled faintly of lemon oil and fresh coffee, creating an atmosphere of comfort and productivity. James leaned forward in his leather chair, his calloused fingers tracing the outline of a detailed blueprint, not for a simple home repair project this time, but for something much bigger, something that could change lives. "So what do you think?" Megan asked, her eyes bright with enthusiasm despite the slight tiredness that had become more noticeable lately. She adjusted her reading glasses and smoothed her hand over the architectural drawings. "A community center focused on helping single parents get back on their feet?" James nodded slowly, his weathered hands moving across the paper as he studied every detail. The blueprint showed a spacious building with multiple rooms, each carefully labeled with its intended purpose. "It's exactly what this town needs," he said, his voice filled with quiet amazement. "A place where parents can get job training while their kids are looked after in a safe environment, maybe even some basic home repair classes, computer skills, financial planning." He smiled, thinking of his own difficult journey from desperation to hope. "And your business could be the cornerstone of it?" Megan added, shuffling through a stack of documents with obvious excitement. "You could teach those classes, mentor others who want to start their own businesses, share everything you've learned about building something from nothing." The idea made James's heart swell with possibilities he'd never dared to imagine. Just 2 years ago, he'd been struggling to put food on the table and keep a roof over Lily's head. Now, his handyman business was not only thriving, but growing every month, and here he sat with the chance to help others avoid the crushing hardships he'd faced alone for so long. "I've already talked to my financial advisors about the initial funding," Megan continued, her voice taking on a business-like tone as she shuffled through some official-looking documents. "We can convert that old warehouse on Mason Street, you know the one, with the red brick facade. The location is perfect for our purposes. It's right on the main bus line, walking distance from 3 elementary schools. And there's plenty of parking." James picked up one of the papers, a preliminary budget outline printed on crisp white letterhead. The numbers were staggering, more money than he'd ever seen in one place, dedicated to helping people like him. "Megan, this is incredible," he said, his voice catching slightly. "But are you absolutely sure you want to invest this much? We're talking about a serious commitment here." Megan's face softened, and she reached across the desk to touch his hand gently. "James, what good is all this money if I can't use it to make a real difference in people's lives? Besides," she added with a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes, "I learned from you that sometimes the best investment isn't in stocks or property or fancy things. It's in people. It's in giving someone a chance to build something meaningful." A comfortable silence fell between them as they both remembered how far they'd traveled from that first meeting at the bus stop. James thought about that terrible day when he'd collapsed from hunger and exhaustion, how close he'd been to letting his stubborn pride stop him from accepting the help that would change everything. Now, here he was, sitting in a beautiful study, planning to help others alongside the woman who'd refused to let him give up on himself. "Lily's going to absolutely love this," James said finally, his voice warm with fatherly pride. "She's already talking about volunteering when she's older, maybe during summer breaks. Says she wants to help kids who are going through what she went through. She wants them to know they're not alone. She's got a beautiful heart," Megan replied, her eyes growing soft with affection. "Just like her father." James felt his cheeks warm at the compliment, still not entirely comfortable with praise after years of feeling like a failure. Well, she's had some pretty good examples lately. You know, she still talks about that birthday party you helped arrange last month. Sometimes I think the smallest acts of kindness leave the biggest marks on a child's heart. They spent the next hour going over intricate details, potential programs for different age groups, staffing needs, partnerships with local schools and businesses, even the color scheme for the children's area. James found himself getting more excited with each possibility they discussed, his mind already racing ahead to picture the faces of people whose lives they could touch, families they could help lift out of the darkness he knew so well. "We'll need to start small, of course," Megan cautioned, though her eyes sparkled with the same enthusiasm that energized James. "Maybe begin with weekend programs, see what works and what doesn't, then expand gradually as we figure out what the community needs most." "That's exactly how the best things grow," James agreed, thinking of his own business. "One step at a time, built on a solid foundation that won't crumble when the storms come." He grinned, his contractor's instincts kicking in. "Speaking of foundations, I should do a thorough inspection of that warehouse before we get too far along with our plans. Make sure the bones are good and the structure can handle what we're planning." "Always the handyman," Megan teased gently. She reached for her delicate china teacup, but her hand trembled slightly as she lifted it. James pretended not to notice. He learned that she hated drawing attention to any signs of her illness, preferring to focus on the future rather than dwell on her health challenges. "You know," she continued after taking a careful sip, "when Thomas left me all that Amazon stock, I felt burdened by it, overwhelmed, like it was this huge responsibility I hadn't asked for and didn't deserve. But now," she gestured at the plans spread before them like a roadmap to hope, "now it feels like a gift I can finally use the way it was meant to be used. Like maybe this was always the plan." James understood that feeling completely. His own modest success had taught him that true wealth wasn't measured by the numbers in your bank account. It was about what you did with whatever you had, no matter how small or large. "We should celebrate this moment," Megan declared suddenly, her face brightening with an idea. "Let's call Lily. Tell her to come over here straight after school. We'll order pizza from that place she loves and start brainstorming names for the center. Maybe she'll have some ideas we haven't thought of." James laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Pizza? What happened to that fancy personal chef of yours with all the five-star training? Even billionaires need comfort food sometimes," Megan replied with a playful wink. "Besides, Lily loves building her own pizzas with all those toppings. She says it makes her feel like an architect designing something special." Later, as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in soft pastels, James stood on Megan's spacious back patio. The wooden deck stretched out beneath his feet, surrounded by carefully tended flower beds that burst with color. He watched Lily chase fireflies in the manicured garden, her laughter floating on the evening breeze like music. She'd been absolutely thrilled about the community center plans, immediately suggesting they include a children's library because books make everything better, and some kids don't have any at home. The sound of the sliding glass door made him turn around. Megan joined him on the patio, wrapping a soft cashmere shawl around her shoulders against the gentle evening breeze. The air carried the scent of jasmine from her garden and the distant aroma of barbecue from a neighbor's backyard. "Hard to believe how much has changed in such a short time," she murmured, following his gaze to where Lily danced among the fireflies like a fairy in a children's story. "And how much is still changing every single day." James nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace and contentment settle over him like a warm blanket. The future stretched out before them, full of endless possibilities and genuine promise. There would be challenges ahead, of course. There always were when you tried to build something meaningful. But now they faced those challenges together, stronger and wiser for having learned to lean on each other when the load got too heavy to carry alone. "Daddy, look," Lily called out excitedly, holding up her small hands in wonder. A firefly blinked steadily between her cupped palms, a tiny beacon of light in the gathering dusk. "Isn't it the most beautiful thing you've ever seen?" "Sure is, sweetheart," James replied, his heart so full of love and gratitude he thought it might burst. "Just about the most beautiful thing in the whole world." Beautiful indeed. This perfect moment, this unexpected friendship that had bloomed from a chance encounter, this opportunity to make a real difference in the world around them. The sun continued its journey toward the horizon, painting the evening sky in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and deep purple. James stood there with Lily beside him, both of them watching nature's magnificent light show, while Megan's quiet presence provided the kind of support he'd never known he needed. Tomorrow would bring new tasks to tackle, new challenges to overcome, new opportunities to help others find their way out of the darkness and into the light. But for now, this moment was more than enough. This perfect blend of deep gratitude for how far they'd all come and bright hope for where they were going together. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of James Palmer, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.